Good morning. My name is Matthew Hamilton, a student in the MSW program at Widener University. This is a report, a project for human behavior and the social environment. This presentation is about the recent rise of suicide in middle-aged men. First, looking at what defines middle age. Middle age, according to Erikson, middle age is the age from 40 to 65 years, is stage 7 in Erikson's stages of development, next to the last stage of development, followed only by late adulthood. As you can see in this picture, there are the different levels. Middle age is near the end of the steps, near the top, noted by the conflict of generativity versus stagnation. It is preceded by young adulthood, which has the conflict of intimacy versus isolation, and is followed by older adulthood with the conflict of integrity versus despair. Generativity is defined as the willingness to care about the people and things one has produced, as well as a commitment to protecting and enhancing the condition of one's society. This is basically, in simple terms, caring about the people around you and caring about the contribution that you're making to the world. Stagnation is the opposite idea, where you feel like you are not making any type of impact in the world, that people don't care about you, and that um, your work is not worth anything. Stagnation in adults in middle adulthood are shown by those who cannot look beyond their own emotional needs. They may be in stagnation. Middle adults in stagnation often lack the skills to deal with negative events in their lives. So any conflicts or any problems that come about, they are not as equipped to handle it as people who are looking more in the generativity ideal. This, in certain circumstances, can lead to suicidal ideation and attempts. Suicide as a general problem is very serious. It is a serious health problem. It is currently the 11th leading cause of death in the United States. It is also the leading source of death by injury in the United States, surpassing motor vehicle accidents. So this is taking into account anytime someone is killed via injury to their body. So it could mean a car accident, it could mean another type of accident, such as a fall, or even falling in the water and drowning, things like that. So suicide, hurting of oneself to the point where that person has died, that is the number one source of death of injury in the United States. Suicide is also on the rise in general for the general population. The current rate of suicides in the general population is 12.6 occurrences per 100,000 people. This is up from 10.5 in the year 2000. Suicide awareness. There is ongoing campaigns to make sure people are aware of the warning signs of someone who is thinking about suicide. The majority of those programs are geared towards teens that are thinking about committing suicide. And teen suicide is a big problem. Much attention and resources are paid to suicide prevention. Most of the efforts are geared toward preventing teen suicide. This is just one example of a flyer, a poster that shows the different risks that can happen to students in a school setting, from high school down to middle school, even down to elementary school. Bullying at those ages are a big cause of the reason for suicide. When a person goes to school, a child goes to school every single day and is bullied and cannot think of any way out of it. Hearing some of these, among other things, yelled at them: homo, loner, freak, loser, trash. These are just some of the words that a lot of students hear on a daily basis in order to cut them down and to make them feel less about themselves. But even though prevention programs are vital to those seeking help and to those willing to help, the funds to provide these programs are getting harder to find. For example, the funding for suicide and prevention research from the National Institute of Health has dropped nearly 20% just from 2011. So the total in 2011 was about 45 million earmarked towards specifically working on suicide prevention as a health problem. And the upcoming budget in 2016, it's down to 40 million. To give you an idea of the impact that suicide is having in our society, here's a short video talking about suicide in general, and the doctor on the video is also explaining the impact of suicide specifically among middle-aged individuals.
Suicide is one of the leading causes of death in our country and actually in the world, and yet it's largely preventable. It has been trending up in terms of our national rate of suicide over the last decade or so. It had trended down prior to that. So we're at a place now where we really want to make a difference. We want to use the methods that we know can work to lower the suicide rate and allow those who are struggling to get the help that they need. Mental health problems play a significant role for suicide risk. In fact, if you had to pick out one of the many risk factors that tend to come together to create suicide, mental health problems could be called actually a necessary but not sufficient factor in place. In greater than 90% of cases of suicide, as shown in the research, there is a diagnosable mental health condition at play, whether or not it was diagnosed or treated. Now, many other factors then lay on top of that to rise up to create an imminent risk for that sense of desperation, hopelessness, but then also the thought, the planning, and the ability to act on those suicidal impulses. It is really important to note that white males in their middle age account for about 70% of the death toll from suicide each year. And in fact, over the last decade, the rate of suicide for that part of our population went up the most. It went up almost 30%. You can think about things like they are just as prone to mental health problems as any other segment of society, and yet they might be some of the folks in our society who are the least willing or able to seek help because of social norms, and frankly because men don't seek medical care as much as frequently as women do in general, let alone when it comes to mental health. One other factor that's really important to understand is that for the baby boomer generation, that group as a cohort starting many decades ago actually had already shown an increased risk for mental health problems and suicide, addictions, and other psychosocial problems. 10 years ago, within the suicide prevention world, which is a pretty specialized world, there were very limited activities going on a grassroots level. There were some, and it was largely families who had lost a loved one to suicide. In our organization, for example, we went from few people banding together to over 150,000 people walking, speaking out about their experience of even lived experience of having lived through suicidal thinking or attempts. That level of awareness raising and sort of shedding of the stigma is one of the signs of just the changing times and the readiness, the desire to make an impact on suicide.
So speaking specifically, as the doctor mentioned about middle-aged men as being at particular risk, they are the ones not often mentioned as far as in prevention programs. They're the ones that are least likely to seek help for medical help in general, let alone mental help. Unless you knew of a loved one or close friend, most people had not known a person in middle age that committed suicide. That was until August 11, 2014, when actor-comedian Robin Williams committed suicide. He was at the later stages of what's considered middle adulthood in his early 60s. But a lot of men are in that age as well that are still facing a lot of the same health problems, among other issues that are going on in their lives. William's death was one of just thousands of middle aged men that took their lives in that year. In fact, middle aged men are committing suicide at a higher rate than nearly every other age group. As you can see from this chart, teen suicides, there are a lot of them, but not nearly as many as those committing suicides in older ages. In the 20s and early 30s, it's sort of stable as far as consistent, the number of men committing suicides, somewhere in 33,000 or 34,000 during the span of the study from 1999 to 2011. But notice it starts going up once you hit age 35, increasing by 5,000 more in that age range. In the 40s and 50s, the numbers of committing suicide are in the 40s and almost 50,000s, most notably between the ages of 45 and 49. Those are the ages where the conflict of generativity versus stagnation are really in full effect. What makes middle-aged male suicide so different? Suicides in the age ranges of 36 to 64, that is a wide range, but that covers most of middle adulthood, has increased 27% between the years of 1999 and 2003. As the doctor mentioned before, many men do not seek help in stressful circumstances. Not only are they unlikely as much as women to seek medical help for normal medical conditions, such as ongoing health problems, such as diabetes or skin disease or bone disease, arthritis, general things that most people seek medical help about. They also are much less likely to seek help for mental health circumstances. In surveys done with men's next of kin, these are their loved ones, whether it's their spouse, their widow, or their children, or if their parents are around, their parents as well. Anyone who are very close to these men that committed suicide. In a survey of next of kin to those, certain risk factors were present in many of these circumstances. In over 50%, 58% of the people that were polled, the next of kin, they mentioned that the person was experiencing intimate partner problems. This means ongoing conflict with their spouse. And that takes a very heavy toll because it's something that they face on a daily basis. Whenever they go home, it's something that causes conflict every single day. Criminal and or legal problems, if they are facing jail time, if they are facing criminal charges against them, if they are facing legal problems, somebody's being sued. These are definite problems that weigh heavily on someone's mind. And if they think about the possibility of going to prison or going to jail for a significant amount of time, especially in later life, they can possibly see what's the point of even living when they might be spending a significant amount of their remaining years in incarceration. Also, job loss and financial problems during these years and going on to other years. This is when the economic downturn took place. A lot of people were losing their jobs, losing their homes, losing their property, losing their retirement. A lot of financial burdens were weighing heavily on men during this period. And also ongoing health problems, meaning if they have a chronic condition, such as arthritis or diabetes, something that impairs their way of life, this is something that they may not see um, any hope of getting over. And if they get it such something more serious like a cancer diagnosis, that would be something that weighs heavily on them as well. The next video will reflect on specific risk factors for specific populations, and we'll talk to you soon.